name's Stephen Good. I'm Chief Exec at the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. We're Scotland's national innovation centre for construction in the built environment, and our mission is to supercharge a culture of innovation right across the built environment and construction ecosystems so we can make where we live, work and play perform as best as it can for every one of the citizens of Scotland. With this podcast series, we really wanted to use it as a way of galvanising people to take action, move on from simply discussing the key challenges and opportunities facing the built environment today, and really get into exploring how we drive change, how we identify specific actions we could take today, and focus on the key outcomes that will create real impact. What are the things we could do now that in the years to come we might be able to look back at and say that was the point at which things really started to change for the better? So, whether it's around how we tackle climate change or embrace new digital design and manufacturing technologies, or how we transform the skills ecosystem across the built environment so we're better prepared for the massive changes that are coming our way, or indeed how we explore how we really shift the dial on things like diversity and inclusion across the sector so we build an industry that's representative of our society. Across these and many more themes, we hope there's something in this podcast series that you feel passionate about and you're inspired to take action, then we'd love to help you on that journey. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple and other podcast platforms, or you can find all of our podcasts on the website at cs-ic.org. So, moving on, it is with great pleasure that I am back in the Innovation Factory again. So, episode 4, we were in the Innovation Factory. You maybe recall if you've caught that with Alex McLaren from Heriot-Watt University talking about the solar decathlon. It's brilliant to be back here again today. Things are obviously opening up a little bit, which is great. I'm here today with Andy Outram, who at the end of May took over as chair of our governance board. Andy's also director at Turner Townsend and has been involved in the Scottish construction industry for 35 years. He's helped define some of the Scottish landscape and built environment generally. He's been project management director in a whole range of high profile schemes, including the 2014 Commonwealth Games Athletes Village in Glasgow, the SSE Hydro and the event complex at Aberdeen, TECA, to name but a few. So a lot of really high profile projects Andy's been right in the middle of. So Andy, welcome and thank you for joining us today. It's really great to have you with us, both as our new chair and also here today to talk about what innovation means to you and your vision, I suppose, for a better built environment. So welcome, great to have you along.
Thanks, Stephen. That's very nice of you to ask me out here today to the Innovation Factory. It's the first time I've been in here since obviously lockdown, and it's really a very, very busy place. I can see there's a lot of good stuff going here, and I'm looking forward to the role and supporting you and the governance board in the future. Brilliant.
So I think there's no shortage of opportunities, I guess, for the sector at the moment. There's plenty of things on our to-do list at the Innovation Centre. There's plenty of things on industry's to-do list. There's a lot of huge opportunities on the horizon, I think, no more so than how we take the industry forward around climate change, which is massive. We've got the recovery period post-pandemic to navigate through, and a lot of things moving in that place. We have, on our doorstep right now, the challenges of, potentially Brexit-driven, pandemic-driven cost increases across the industry that are really pushing businesses to the edges of what's feasible at the moment. We're exploring different innovative ways of overcoming some of those challenges, but there's no shortage of things to get your sleeves rolled up and getting around. We've got a great board, as you know. You joined our first board meeting back at the end of May. So I think this is a good opportunity for this podcast just to share with our listeners and others out in that built environment ecosystem a little bit about what makes Andy tick, and what your kind of appetite and vision and opportunity you spot around the industry to innovate and take that forward. So really great to have you here today. Thank you for giving up your time. Brilliant to have you in the Innovation Factory. We've had a wee tour around already safely. There's obviously, as you say, a lot going on. There's a lot of really exciting projects that have that live build kind of part to them just now. A lot of demonstrator type things that we're involved in supporting industry deliver for COP26 coming up in November, obviously. So on we'll get to some of that in a minute or two, but as an introduction, would you maybe take a little minute or two just to tell our listeners a little bit around who you are, your background, what's got you involved in this space, and what your kind of aspirations are, I suppose, around the innovation side?
Yeah, no, as you say, I've been 35 years in the industry. I'm the real estate lead director now for Turner Townsend in Scotland, which covers a multitude of sins, shall we say. But it's a very enjoyable role in an industry which I fell into, to be perfectly frank, and people of my generation did. And in answer to one of your questions there, why do I want to get involved in something like this? In the 35 years, probably there hasn't really been a time when a lot of people, innovation hasn't normally been associated with the construction process or the industry. But there's almost like the alignment of stars that's been coming in the last few years with climate change, all the rest of it. But also with the pandemic and Brexit and other things like this, there's almost a level playing field, I feel, within the industry, and a desire to change. And I've had, as you know, some interest in the Innovation Centre since back in 2014 when you first started it. But it was a different model to what it is now. And it's interesting stepping back, Stephen, and looking at the sort of 7 years where I've not had as much, over that period, because the last few years I've not been heavily involved. But the way that it's actually progressed, you can see the desire of the industry to innovate. And to my mind, innovation isn't just coming up with a widget. It's actually innovation around how you think, how you approach things. And too long in the industry, we have just sat there and just done the same thing, made the same mistakes continuously, and come up with the same solutions and the same product. And that's my desire. I've reached the sort of stage in my career where, let's say, 35 years, the industry's been good to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not slagging it off or criticising it. I've had some great jobs like the Hydro. It's taken me to places like Milan to do a shopping centre, or to Dublin to do shopping centre and residential. It's taken me to Northern Ireland. I've worked in London. So it's a great place to actually go meet new people, which I think is important as well in these environments, because they'll innovate as well. If you talk to people about that, then changes, then innovation happens. It's collaboration. And for that reason, I've been really, I really wanted to get involved in this again. And I'm delighted actually to be the chair.
Yeah. No, well, I know it's. I know we've had we actually both first worked together, I think, on the
Commonwealth Games Village, yeah.
Commonwealth Games, exactly, yeah. So we've known each other for a good wee while, and yeah, you are, for listeners' benefit, you were one of the industry chairs of one of our technical advisory groups way back at the beginning, and helped steer a lot in that modern methods of construction sort of space, which was an area that, as you see over your shoulder now, you can see a lot of the things that have progressed and have moved on in that space, which is great. But how have you guys at Turner Townsend found lockdown? How have you managed to navigate, I suppose, the challenges of the last 15 months?
It's been a very, like any business, it's been a very stressful time. Particularly for the staff, the well-being, particularly of our staff in Scotland. In England, the rules have been, I wouldn't say they've been less onerous, but the Scottish lockdown rule is stay at home. In England, it's stay at home, but have mindfulness around your people about allowing them to make the offices available. And it's a very fine line with how businesses are working from that point of view. I'm pleased to say there has been no shortage of work. I've actually seen a number of good practices coming out, which I didn't think were possible. I know of one particular client who, contracts in particular, Stephen, there's no allowance for COVID situation. It's, the lawyers will argue black and white about whether it's a force majeure event. But the reality is, it seems to be that people are not accepting it as a force majeure event. But what they are doing is taking a view. And I know clients, one in particular, who said, I'm making a profit, but if I turn around and say I'm not going to, I'm going to, take damages because the contractor's late, he's never going to get it finished because his subcontractor supply chain is going to go bust. So they're actually eating into the profit. So, they willingly said, I'll pay out my profit in an effort to keep this job going for the long term. And I think it's encouraging to see that. We've seen a lot of, certainly the public sector, I've got to say, has actually been very buoyant in this period as well, which is good to see. It's all Keynesian economics, if you like, but in Turner Townsend, the infrastructure team are really booming with the amount of work they've got ongoing. And even in the real estate side, with the schools programme that's been launched by the Scottish Government, has seen a mass of opportunities arising. Probably the private sector's not as buoyant, but I think there's question marks. I mean, coming out of this, I'm holding a round table probably in the next couple of months called Repurposing the High Street. You might think repurposing the High Street is what do we do about shops. It's actually offices as well. And it's actually going to focus on sustainability as well, because coming out of this, we are going to have an entirely different landscape to our towns and cities. So we're focusing on things like that. We're focusing on the here and now, but focusing on the future with the towns and cities as well.
Excellent. No, that's really interesting, Andy. And you touched on there, obviously, there's no shortage of work. Does that mean that you guys are trying to grow your team? And what do you think the skills capacity is looking like in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to grow our team, and we're not at Turner Townsend. We're no different to probably a number of our competitors, because I know that it is a very, very busy time for people looking for staff. And that's not just in consultancy, it's in construction companies, architects, the works. And I haven't worked out yet whether this is a case of the Brexit impact, because there used to be a lot of Europeans do a lot of the electricians and plumbers. I mean, on the conference centre in Aberdeen, you could walk around that site and you almost didn't hear an English accent. But to be honest with you, or a British accent, to be honest with you, I was pleased to see that. But all these people, I think, have gone home, so to speak. And we're actually seeing quite a dearth coming through. I think it's exacerbated as well. In the country, we've had this mentality down the years that when there's a recession like there was in 2008, businesses tend to not hire younger people or cut back on graduate intake, or indeed make, sadly, people younger redundant, rather than going further up the tree and looking at it. So, we're 10 years on plus since the last recession, and we've got a middle management hole at all levels in industry, I believe, hitting us in the construction sector at the moment, and it's starting to show. Where is that middle management talent? And that's again an area where I think with the programmes that I see getting run at CSIC, it's definitely an interest to me. Going back to what I said at the beginning about falling into the industry, back at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, I was trying to get a job in a shipyard. Now, why the hell I did that? It's just as well I didn't. But I thought it was a fantastic industry, and I fell into the construction industry, like so many. But there is actually a real opportunity here to make, through what we're doing at CSIC, to make the industry attractive to young people and build again, so that we don't end up in another 10 years with another management gap and we're scrambling around trying to find people and talent.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation we've had for years, really. Mark Farmer sits on our board, and Mark was involved in the Modernise or Die review report a couple of years ago and spoke about this skills burning platform and the opportunity to address it, and that was way pre-pandemic, which has exacerbated a lot of situations, as potentially has Brexit. And I think we in Scotland certainly historically have suffered from that talent drain a little bit as well. So as London and the South East perhaps have gaps and require more labour, it naturally moves there from other parts of the UK, doesn't it?
I think it does, and I think the important thing as well, Stephen, is that for so many years as well, we've traditionally gone to colleges and universities for people with, building degrees or quantity surveying or whatever. The good thing, and I'll be honest with you, I was actually needed to be convinced that non-cognates coming into the industry would, work. But to be honest with you, some of the talent that our graduate programme runs at Turner Townsend, some of the applicants that are coming through are absolutely outstanding. From lawyers, accountants, sort of degrees, but they're really, really switched on and they can adapt. And given that the industry that we're looking at is evolving, I think it will broaden our outlook and make us actually an industry that, is up there, that people want to join.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We see that a lot in a lot of the skills programmes we're involved in. A lot of our MSc programmes, undergrad stuff, is actually this industry is ripe for skill sets that would come from a whole range of areas, manufacturing, engineering, digital world, a whole range of different areas. This sector is big enough and broad enough to actually need almost all skills, all talents from all places. And that's, we look at the challenges that oil and gas industry, for example, is going to be facing over the next 10, 15 years. as we transition away from fossil fuels and look towards more renewables, clearly a lot of that talent will move over into renewables world, but actually this industry will be crying out for a lot of that talent as we look at the massive programme of work we need to do to decarbonise the built environment that's already built and build new buildings that are as efficient and low carbon, low emissions as they possibly can be. So there's challenges in that front, but actually you can spot areas where you think there's maybe some relevant solutions. So that's an area, certainly from an Innovation Centre point of view, and with your support and the board's encouragement, we've been looking at a lot of opportunities around that. So we're already, you're actually just out a shot behind your shoulder as one of the skills transition training programme projects that we're working on, Passive House in Practice, and that as a way of developing really specific relevant future skills for people in the industry, I think is a great initiative to build on. We're focusing on new build at the moment, but actually the opportunity around Enerfit and the retrofit version of Passive House, I think is a massive area where the quality and the detailing and the attention to detail, the attitude and behaviours that you need to be able to build that kind of level of quality is exactly what we'll need as we transform the industry going forward. So it's all for us as an innovation centre. It's all really in that sweet spot at the moment. What's been your personal experience around kind of innovation over the years? You touched on some projects at the beginning, but specifically, what have you seen and what have you learned over your career around innovation?
Do you know, I might actually say something a bit shocking here, Stephen, that there hasn't been a lot of innovation in a lot of the projects I've dealt with, which is sad to say. But I think that's an indictment on the industry with what I was saying at the beginning, whereby we've gone down a particularly pre-prescribed route that we just roll out every time. But I do think, the industry is changing. Probably the main one, the innovation-wise, that I still get tickled about when I think about it, was on the hydro arena. At the start, I came into the hydro arena just as it was finishing off the design. I joined Turner Townsend and had to take it from that stage through the planning and then on to site for the delivery stage. And just as it was, going through the planning process, there was a realisation that the architects had designed, the walls, if you've seen them on the hydro, currently have what I'm going to say ETFE, because I can't pronounce the full version of it.
Okay, we'll stick with acronyms, that's fine.
But ETFE wasn't the first intention. The first intention was to put onto that was traditional curtain wall glazing. Now, a number of things about that. It was actually going to add a massive amount of money and in terms of pressure on the frame to do that.
Right, okay,
the ETFE itself is 1% the weight of the curtain wall system, which was quite incredible. And I'll be honest, I can't tell you how it actually came up. I think it was one of these things where Foster's, as the architects, decided they wanted to think of something a bit different because it looked great with the curtain walling, but then there was all these other things about cost, about curtain walling. But then it came down to as well, hang on a minute, coming up the Clyde, if you stand in the Clyde on a drafty day, you'll get blown away down there if you're not careful. So it was how will this affect what is, effectively plastic bags full of air, right? But the suppliers of this, it was a German company from what I remember, I can't remember their name, but the ETFE actually, it's got wind sensors at the top in the hydro. And as this wind comes up, it deflates. It's like a sail, if you're in a firm wind, you're going along, you have to have your sail to match the wind pressure. And this building almost breathes. And that's the way I look at it. And if you look as well, that you actually think the hydro is designed as well. The roof during a concert can rise, I think it's either 150 mil or 170 mil, depending upon the humidity and everything that's going on. So if you think about this, a concert going on with AC/DC or Led Zeppelin, I'm showing my age now, but anyway, someone like that, and it's blowing a hoolie, for a bit of a better expression, outside, this building's breathing. And I think that's very, very clever. And it was very, very, there was a lot of foresight went into actually changing that material. But generally, you could say that innovation comes up to different things where people think of procuring different things and doing them in different ways. But in my experience, we've always hit sort of traditional things, you can't do that because the legal process is looking for warranties for suppliers or subcontractors and all the rest of it. And that's the bit that I'm keen. We need to get to a point where we're all thinking about that. And again, going back to the pandemic, my experience with the likes of the CICV forum that I'm seeing as well is that there is a willingness now to start thinking differently. And it's contractors, consultants, gone is the adversarial. Well, it's not gone. Hopefully it's going to go as people get away from the adversarial nature that comes through and allows the thinking to take place.
Yeah, move away from that combative kind of approach to contracting to a more collaborative approach. Yeah. I mean, we certainly see it a lot in terms of, we're an innovation centre, so we're here to support industry to innovate, but actually that innovation capacity or potential is often really limited because of contractual circumstances or legal edges to things. So the big challenge is, how do you de-risk innovation, I suppose. What's your thoughts on how we go about de-risking this for the industry?
I think you've got to create the right conditions for that, and probably where I came up with that, where I've learned how you do that was it goes back to the sort of early 90s where I did a construction master's degree part-time at Heriot Watt. I used to go to Heriot Watt twice a year, every 6 months, and I met 20 guys. Now, the thing that I found about this was it was 20 people, only 4 of them were Scots. The rest came from around the world. One guy was from a place called Pago Pago, which is apparently an island in the South Pacific somewhere. But the ideas that were swapped at that, and these people were clients, and from clients, consultants, contractors, everybody. And forget the lectures with respect to the lecturers at Heriot Watt University. The learning experience about how we can do things better and how we can actually create conditions was from talking to these people, learning different things. And I think that's one of the challenges, Stevens, is how we get people into that mindset. With the greatest respect to our clients, I'll say we've got some great clients, because if they hear this, I'm not intending to slag them off, but there's a level of expectation sometimes that comes with clients as well, whereby they just want it done, and they want it done in a certain way. That is changing, thankfully, because no matter where we are, whether in the private or the public sector, investors in this country are changing their attitude, which is good. They're recognising the need or the impact of climate change. They need to change their ethos. It's now no longer building a sexy office building in the middle of Glasgow for a quick turn. They now actually recognise we need to build it with the right criteria, the net zero carbon construction, and whole life costing in use and what happens at the end of the building, etc. That's driven by tenants. Everybody's getting into that right place. But what's going to need to come with that as well is, don't rush the design, get the costs right, think through the opportunities for innovation. Stand back from it a little bit sometimes and say, right, can we do this a different way? Do we use the right profits, products? I mean, going back to the hydro again, as I say, I wish I did know. I think it was before my time, but I really wish I knew what decision was taken, because that was, innovative in itself. Yeah. And I'd like to have known what the process around that, because we should do that more often. And that might mean, though, impacts and programmes that clients don't like, but there's a balance.
Andy, turning to climate change, the climate crisis, climate emergency, it's built up, I suppose, in the industry a lot of appetite for setting out organisations' kind of directions of travel. We're working in a pan-industry sense to look at that just now, but Turner Townsend has launched its own commitment to address the climate crisis through the Turnover a New Leaf initiative. Can you tell the listeners a little bit more about that? Yeah,
Turning Over a New Leaf. I mean, it's obviously a play on what's Turner, but it is actually an initiative that we've only launched fairly recently. We've been working on this now for a good while, but it's been brought into focus even with Alec Sharma, COP26 president, what's coming out of this, and the realisation that beyond COP26, businesses are going to have to adjust. They're going to have to change quite dramatically. Regardless of COP26, we should be doing it anyway. So the Turning Over a New Leaf is a route map, really, that is going to be delivered across our global organisation. And within that, the main aim is that by 2030, we will be net zero. And there's a number of steps that we've taken. There's an 8-step process that we put in place. And it's things like we're going to transition to sustainable energy in our offices. We're looking at, very closely at our business travel policy. Not necessarily limiting people to flying, but it's actually been a great learner, the pandemic, that, you suddenly find, well, I don't need to, go to every meeting.
Yeah, you don't need to jump on a plane
so
to
there's
go to
things like
meetings,
that, yeah. I mean, so far, we've got reduced emissions per head from 2014 of 54% on people. It's things like, as well, being a zero plastic organisation. It's that sort of type thing. And it's given out to staff. It's given out to our clients. We explain this to our clients. A lot of clients, we don't say we're not going to work with clients who are not interested in that, because more and more of them are actually, aligned with that thinking. And it actually helps. We've found some clients are really interested to the point that say, well, we'll follow you, what you do in that. So we're setting projects up as well with the Turning Over the New Leaf initiative as well, which is excellent. And it's actually verified as well by the Science Target Initiative, SBTI, which is, we're really proud of that, because they've looked at it and said, this is the way that businesses should be doing it. Now,
tangible.
It is. There's a number of other businesses that are looking at it similar to us, but I think the more that companies like Turner Townsend show a leading way, then others will follow. And we're not the type of people that get upset by that. When it's something like this, we actually want to see more and more clients, consultants, contractors supporting it. I mean, let's face it, not a lot of these things are difficult. If you've ever done the online carbon calculator, I'd encourage people to do that, because that's actually, it's one done by the Scottish Government. I'm sure there's others, but if you do that and you actually calculate, your carbon footprint, you find that actually it's not that difficult to change it. It's just you don't think about it. And this whole initiative of Turning Over a New Leaf is aimed at trying to get people to think differently, staff and clients. So, and we've got a few projects around the world. I mean, the Kariba Forest plantation, which is in Zimbabwe, we're looking at an initiative around that. We've got other things as well. The retrofit programme that we've got with London and Westminster, we're looking at implementing it in that as well at the moment with, I think it's Westminster City Council.
Great.
So,
excellent. And I mean, obviously that's brilliant to hear Turner Townsend's kind of commitment to that. How far do you think, or what's your sense across the sector of how much progress has been made around that in other organisations? Do you think we're at the beginning of that process and you guys are leading?
I think we're at the beginning. I wouldn't. Well, I'd like to think we're, to say we're leading, but I'm not going to sit here and say that, because others will say no, we're leading, and it's just that it becomes an irrelevant point, really, to my mind. I think as we're showing a bit of leadership, if others are doing the same thing, it's not going to be one person who's leading this. We should be all in this together. There's a number. I think the contracting industry is moving a lot closer to it, but I think some of the work of the Scottish Government, I mean, UK government, I think, has been a bit behind, in my own impression, in Scotland in the past. We've gone down a renewables route a lot quicker than I think they have in England. We've got a sustainable forest that we're looking at as well, and aspects like that. So I think we've come forward a little bit quicker in that respect. I think the contractors have actually led on it. Consultants are following. There's still an awful lot to do. But as I say, the last 18 months with clients has led, with this change with investors, developers and things like that, has led a change. And I mean, there's an example I could give you, though, where we're getting a bit out of sync. Higher education, a university who I won't mention, is looking to do a fairly major build using passive house technologies. Now, that's great. It will be, as far as I'm aware, the first building, education-type building, in Scotland built with passive house technology of this particular size, because it's a very large project. But the issue is they're insisting having contractors with experience of passive house methods to build it. Yeah. And the reality is, in Scotland, we are right at the beginning of that. We don't have it. And down in it, I mean, people know how to do it, but if you say in a bid situation to contractors, give me 3 projects that you've done passive house higher education in Scotland,
it's difficult.
It's difficult. Yeah. So you have to go down south, and this is where there's a level of expectation. Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, which is great, but it needs to be mapped out and with demonstrable timescales to say we can hit this then, and we've got the skills base to do it by then.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts
Yeah.
that have to be tackled together, I suppose, in this journey, isn't it? And that's where your point, about a lot of different organisations are developing their roadmaps and their toolkits and whatnot.
Sure.
I think what we're focusing on is that wider piece of how does that all get plugged together. So business A, C and D can be doing a variety of different things, but how can we try and help put that within a framework where when you then do have those opportunities that come along, it's much easier to spot A, where the capability already lies, but B, where there's gaps, and then that should help government and other training organisations, potentially the stuff we're doing around the Passive House and Practice programme, really focus in on opportunities, so that businesses are then able to make that investment and the knowledge that there's a real demand for those skills going forward. So that's a really interesting space. I mean, we could talk for hours around that. I'm conscious of time.
Yep.
One area I did want to touch on just before I come to your last question was around leadership within the industry on this journey, and how do you think we can, right across that whole leadership sort of space, so I'm talking about government, policymakers, regulators, clients, the whole industry supply chain side of things. From a CSIC point of view, you're taking on the role as our chair. Where do you think we could be most effective in helping in this space?
Yeah, okay. Well, a couple of points to think about it, Stephen. I mean, just when you talk about government, it's always been a bit of a surprise to me, UK government or Scottish government, that we don't actually have a Minister for Construction or something. We've got a housing minister, but that's only part of the story. And I think, if I look at the RICS, the RIAS, the CIOB, we all have different agendas, and we all do our own things in a different way, and we all make our representations through to government, through CICV, etc. But it's really been in Scotland the housing minister who's been getting most of the comments and all the rest of it. And you've got to remember, as I said before, that I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a very large percentage in terms of GDP that construction adds to Scotland. Yep. So therefore, it probably deserves more of a public sector or government-led initiative to understand the industry. It employs so many people, as in so important to the industry and the future of creating a sustainable environment, and one that we all want to live in, that it does need that. So it then gives us, where in CSIC are we able to, influence that? And I think, one of the things, Stephen, I've seen that I've been really interested in and really pleasantly surprised is that the connections that you've made over the last 7 years with all of these various bodies. I think if you even look at the governance board, the thing I do like about CSIC is that it's not just sort of like a few contractors or a few architects or whatever. It covers, SMEs, it covers consultants, it covers everything. And that can only grow. And there has to be a time when, I think Scottish Government have been very supportive to CSIC, and I would never, criticise that. I do think, though, and, I get the fact that money's tight and all the rest of it, but it'd be good to actually see the continuation and the commitment on a bigger scale to this. Scotland is a massive opportunity, and without being political about it, this current Scottish Government want to build Scotland to be able to stand on its own. Well, this is an ideal vehicle to make you be that port of call for any construction minister to help influence the policymakers in the industry, be they RIAS, be they RICS, etc. And that's where I think the role could really develop. But what I've seen so far from the couple of months I've been involved since May, it's actually been a really positive steps forward have been made in that. But Rome wasn't built in a day. Indeed,
no, that's true. And just when you were talking there, I pulled up. We've just done some mapping across the new Scottish Government cabinet, and that point, there's now 10 ministers, including 10 cabinet secretaries, including the First Minister. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them have some role that relates to the built environment or some responsibility within their portfolios, and then below that you have the best part of 10 or 12 ministers, of which about 9 at least of them have some connection into the built environment. So yeah, we are right across the whole kind of delivery piece of economic impact, social impact, environmental impact for Scotland. So there's a lot to do there. Right, listen, conscious of time, last question. You've taken over role as chair. at a really critical time. You know, we're right in the middle of this sector, we're right in the middle of Brexit, COVID, new governments just been set up, as you mentioned. We're in a recovery phase. We'll get COP26 on the horizon in the short term, zero carbon transformation in the longer term. What's top of your CSIC board to-do list?
I think very much keeping the momentum going. I think it's been a great job that's been done by John Foster and the board up to this time. As I say, it's certainly come on leaps and bounds, or I don't mean that to be patronising. It has expanded in a great way that I never thought it would since 2014. It has now become an industrial influencer. If I was, you know, my vision about this is at the end of the 3 years, I want much more people to know what has been going on here, because there are still people in our industry who I talked to, you know, when I became chair, and they were saying, "Oh, congratulations! What does that mean? What's it about?" Some of the projects that you've had going on out here are phenomenal, and I would hope with my industry contacts that one of the things I want to do is to be able to, you know, be an ambassador in respect of CSIC. I would like to see as well, and again, this is maybe something that I would like to talk to you about in a little bit more detail, is the board. There are so many talented people in the board who are industry known, and if I think it probably does take place, but I'm only 2 months into it, so I'm not actually seeing. But there must be things that people in CSIC want, and other people that from the industry say, "Well, we need that, and this should be the place to come." And I would like to see that bond growing. I mean, it is CSIC, as you said before, is all about academia and industry coming together. But more and more, I think it needs to go in, because I think the opportunity is there at this moment. You know, as you say, we've got Brexit. We've got a point where we are already experiencing massive supply shortage, and that is coming. I mean, steel and concrete actually have now closed their order book in the country. Now, that is actually fundamental in terms of, so what are the alternatives? And this is where I would like to see the Innovation Centre being the focal point to say, right, what can we do to broaden our aspects on other materials or other ways of doing things? Because, you know, as we turn the corner as well and become, you know, net zero, that demand on traditional ways of doing things, traditional materials, supplies, that's just going to continue. It's going to continue to go like that. We are in a different world coming out of this. If anybody, you know, I keep hearing when we get back to normal, this is the new normal. And I think it's going to be tight for it. But I do think that's a massive opportunity for CSIC to be seen as that fulcrum or that focal point. And that's where I, Stephen, want to support the good work that's been done. And I see it as a major influencer going forward in the industry. I think probably my passionate bit, though, is, and I don't know if this is just because I'm getting to be an old crusty at 58 years old, but I do actually want to see the future leaders team that you've established really winning the Spurs in my time of tenure. I mean, this is a group of, you know, highly talented people from what I can tell, coming forward, wanted to make a mark in the industry, and it's open to all people in that sort of you know, field. And I would love to see that really coming forward. And that's maybe just, as I say, I just look at it and I think, well, I won't be in the industry in, you know, 5, 7, however many years' time. But I do want to see, it's been good to me, the industry. It's been good fun. I've made a lot of good friends. It's had some real rough times. But I actually want to see, you know, people of talent coming into this and not being like I was, which you just fall into it because I had nothing else to do. Yeah,
so industry of choice rather than industry of last resort.
Absolutely, and if I can help promote that through CSIC, then I'll be a happy man.
Fantastic. Well, we're certainly up for it, as you know, and it's a good opportunity to focus board and our team around. There's a huge sort of skills, people, talent, sort of education piece central to what we do. So listen, thank you so much for your time today.
No, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you're in the factory and I'm upstairs in the office, so I'll come down and save you and let the team behind you get on with what they're doing. I think they've switched some of the machinery off to get
they started throwing things at me, Stephen. That means get off.
out of shot behind camera making signs at you. So, no, listen, really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us and
Thanks a
sharing
lot.
your experiences and views.
Great.
We'll catch up shortly. Folks, thank you indeed for listening. I hope you found it enjoyable today. I hope you get a lot out of it. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel. We've got a lot more coming up over the coming months, and do visit the website at cs-ic.org for information on everything that's going on at the Innovation Centre, and to get involved both in the conversation through social media, and reach out if there's particular things that we're doing here that we can help you with, particular things that you need that we can help you with. All the links are in the bio. So take care, everybody. Thanks, Andy, again. Look forward to catching up with you all next time.